He didn't say, "Excuse me." He said, "Move." Her paper cup was halfway to her mouth when the officer's forearm cut across her shoulder like a gate slamming shut. Hot coffee leapt the rim, slid down the side, and bled into the pale fabric of her blouse. She staggered back, not from the force, though there was force, but from the gall of it, the publicness of it, the way the lobby of Hawthorne Middle School fell quiet in a single breath as if someone had snapped the cord that kept sound from crashing to the floor. "Ma'am, you're blocking the desk," the school resource officer said. His name tag read Brandt, each letter carved into black plastic as if permanence were something you could screw into a chest. She blinked once, twice. "I'm signing in for the 9 o'clock IEP meeting," she said softly, pen still hovering over the visitor log. Her handwriting was neat and small, the way teachers write when they spend their lives fitting compassion into margins. "You're agitated," he replied. "Let's lower the temperature." The absurdity of the phrase, after he'd raised it, ripened in the silence. Behind the counter, the secretary's smile had curdled into something brittle and useless. A stray poster about positive school culture flapped against the bulletin board each time the front doors hissed open. Outside, a line of minivans idled, their engines ticking like anxious fingers on a desk. She drew a breath that smelled faintly of Lysol and overbrewed drip. "My name is Amina," she said, steady. "I'm here for my daughter, Lila. I'm not agitated." Officer Brandt leaned in just enough to remind everyone he could. Then sign and step to the side. Her blouse clung where the coffee spread, a slow darkening across the fabric that made her chest feel heavier than it was. She signed, Amina Cole, and slid the pen back into its plastic leash. The leash retracted with a little whine, as if even it disapproved of the morning's choreography. A cluster of 7th graders shuffled by, backpacks thumping their small spines. One of them, tall, lanky, a halo of curls, had his phone out. Not filming. Not yet. He watched the way kids do when they already understand that adults can be dangerous without raising their voices. "Through the doors, ma'am," Brandt said, jutting a shoulder toward the hall. "Wait on the bench." Amina glanced at the clock above the check-in desk. 8:58. She did not say that she arrived early on purpose because early is the currency that special education parents pay for the right to be heard. She did not say that she'd spent last night labeling tabs in a binder, color-coding goals and accommodations, printing the old behavior data and sliding it beneath a clear sleeve so no one could pretend they hadn't seen it. She did not say that her daughter, bright, autistic, sharp as a pin, had come home with new bite marks on her forearm last week and no incident report to explain why. She pressed her palm against the coffee-blackened cloth, feeling the tacky heat through fabric, and stepped toward the bench. "Hands visible, please," Brandt added. "You were waving them around." The sentence landed the way blame does when it's already picked a body to live in. The secretary looked at her desk, suddenly fascinated by paper clips. Amina's eyes flicked to the laminated posters on the wall. "De-escalation starts with us. Breathe before you speak." Then back to Brandt. "I'll wait," she said. The bench was vinyl and cracked. It let out a sigh when she sat, as if tired of carrying parents who learned to sit still before they learned to be believed. Across from her, a display case gleamed, trophies, a faded pennant, a glossy photo of smiling teachers gathered under a banner that read Professional Learning Day. The banner's corner had peeled free. Under the photo, a line of smaller pictures, headshots and names, celebrated presenters from that day. The glass threw back the ceiling lights, so she almost missed it. A tiny square of her own face, printed months before, smiling dutifully, captioned, Amina Cole, Training, De-escalation for Inclusive Classrooms. The glass glare swallowed her name. The world did the rest. The lobby door whooshed open again and the air changed. In came the principal, Mr. Alder, all carefully arranged empathy and a tie with small pine trees. "Good morning," he sang, then saw Amina and faltered. "Miss Cole. You made it." "I did." "Excellent, excellent." He clasped his hands, then unclasped them. He smelled of mint gum and worry. "We'll be in conference too. Just a quick check-in." "Not quick," she said. "Thorough." "Of course." He overnodded. "Of course." Officer Brandt was still posted by the desk like a warning sign no one asked for. He flicked a glance at the principal, then back at Amina. She got heated, he offered. Spilled her coffee. Amina watched Mr. Alder choose his next sentence like stepping stones over a stream he refused to admit could sweep him under. "We're all under pressure this morning," he said, with that careful school voice that sounds like concern until you hear the claws it's hiding. "Let's take deep breaths." "I took one," Amina said, "before I walked in." The principal's smile tightened. "Let's head in." The hallway woke up around them, lockers yawning open, sneakers squeaking, a whiff of pencil shavings and cafeteria syrup. Amina pressed the folder tighter against her ribs, feeling the damp cold against her stomach from the coffee. Fifth period essays curled on a teacher's clipboard like dry leaves. A steel door hummed with the low buzz of a soda machine. At a corner bulletin board, 4 construction paper stars drooped on their staples, the words, "You belong here," drifting at a slant. They entered conference 2. It was smaller than the word conference deserved. A round table crowded the room, chairs tucked so close the legs kissed. Fluorescent lights hummed. The blinds were half closed, carving the morning sun into pale ribs on the carpet. At one end sat Ms. Rivera, special education teacher, her cardigan pilled at the elbows and a pen clenched between fingers stained faintly with dry erase ink. Next to her, the vice principal, Mr. Connors, thick file in front of him like a fortress. A guidance counselor typed already, the staccato of keys declaring, "We record what we choose to remember." Amina took the chair nearest the door. She laid the binder on the table, then a small silicone stem ring beside it, a fidget that looked like jewelry. She wore the twin on her index finger, a silent lullaby for nerves. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Cole," said Mr. Connors, tone making it sound like she'd been invited to a donation gala instead of summoned to salvage her daughter's education. "We'll keep this efficient." "Inefficient is fine if it's honest," Amina said, not unkindly. The counselor kept typing. Before anyone could offer the first non-apology, the door opened. Officer Brandt stepped in without knocking, leaned against the wall, and crossed his arms. "This is a confidential educational meeting," Amina said quietly. "I'm assigned to the building," he said, as if the building were a body and he its spine. Mr. Alder cleared his throat. "It's fine. He can observe." Observe. The word rolled around the room before settling in a corner where it could do the most harm by pretending to do none at all. "Let's begin," Mr. Connors said. Papers shuffled. "We're here to review Lila's progress toward her goals, discuss behavior concerns, and consider a placement adjustment." "Placement adjustment," Amina repeated, and it wasn't a question. It was an echo of 100 rooms just like this one, where the solution to a child's difference is to make them disappear. Ms. Rivera spoke fast, soft. "I love Lila. She is brilliant with patterns. She sings when she writes and it's lovely. But the biting has increased, and the classroom aid is new and Amina prompted. "And we don't have enough staff trained in the new protocol," Ms. Rivera said in a rush, like a confession. Amina turned a page in her binder. The tabs clicked against the rings. She slid forward a sheet with dates, times, observed triggers, successful supports. The paper smelled faintly of printer heat. This data shows the bytes cluster during transitions from unstructured to structured tasks. The plan we wrote last spring addresses that. Visual schedule. 2 sentence prompts. A soft hand on the desk, not her arm. She tapped the margin. "This is the page where we all initialed. It's been photocopied 4 times, but it's still legible." Mr. Connors didn't look down. "We're doing what we can with what we have." "What you have," Amina said evenly, "is a plan that you aren't using." Brandt shifted against the wall. The scent of old coffee drifted up from her blouse with the motion, a stubborn ghost. Amina did not dab at it. She refused to make the evidence disappear. "We're concerned about safety," Mr. Connors said. "Hers and others. We have to consider a different setting for now." "The different setting, where you send kids who don't fit your timing," Amina said. "The room with the flimsy divider and the broken lamp. I know the room." "Let's not dramatize," he replied. She almost laughed. The day had dramatized itself. Ms. Rivera's eyes glistened. We can make changes, she said. We can. We just need training, Amina finished for her. Support. Fidelity. She placed a second handout on the table. It was crisp, brand new, the ink still dark. This is the district's own de-escalation guide. The one that says, and I'm quoting, a calm adult body prevents a child from borrowing your panic. Page 3. She held his gaze. I helped write it. The room stilled. A beat, then to. Mr. Connors glanced at the cover and then back at her face, measuring which would be easier to ignore. So, he said, pasting on a smile, you're familiar with the content. I'm familiar with the failure to apply it, Amina said. The counselor stopped typing for the first time. The air thinned the way air does before a storm or a truth. Outside the window, a PE class banged a ball against asphalt until the thud folded into a rhythm like a heart forced to keep time for a room that had none. The door knocked. A small, careful head appeared around it. Lila's mathematics teacher, Mr. Gray. His tie was crooked and his empathy was real. Sorry, he murmured. Can I just say, when we do the schedule card and the one-sentence preview? She glows. She glows. He swallowed. We didn't have the aid Tuesday. I tried to cover. It wasn't enough. Thank you, Amina said, meaning it. Her throat tightened. Not from the coffee, not from the humiliation, but from the way a simple acknowledgement of her daughter's light could fracture her composure more than any shove. Brant rolled his shoulder, bored. We wrapping up? We're deciding a child's day, Amina said, turning toward him. It deserves more than a shrug. His jaw tilted in a smile that wasn't. Watch the tone, ma'am. Something in the room turned, a slow screw tightening through the floorboards. The secretary's distant phone rang and rang. The guidance counselor's keys resumed their panic. Mr. Alder's pine tree tie swayed as he shifted in his chair, wanting to be anywhere else. Amina placed her palms flat on the table. She felt the binder's spine press into her skin, a small pain with a purpose. I'm asking you to honor the plan your team wrote, she said, looking not at the officer, not at the principal, but at the teachers, and at the file that pretended to be immune to truth. I am asking you not to hide my daughter in a room because adults failed to prepare. Mr. Connors spread his hands. We're at capacity. And, frankly, your demeanor right now is escalating the room. There was the cheap trick. Make the person naming the wound the wound itself. She let a breath fill and leave without hurry. My demeanor is not your justification. Brant pushed off the wall. That's enough, he said, stepping toward her chair. No, Mr. Alder said, too late and too soft. The officer's boot clipped the leg of her chair. The chair lurched. Her binder slid, edges catching on a coffee-wet blouse. The stem ring skittered and fell to the floor, a small metal sound that somehow rang louder than all the bureaucracy in the building. Amina stood, but Brant was already there, crowding her space, chin dipped in the practiced angle of authority. Sit, he ordered. I'm not a student, she said. I'm a parent in a legal meeting. You're a disruption. Ms. Rivera rose too. Officer. He lifted a palm to silence her. For everyone's safety, you'll step into the hall, he said to Amina, or I'll escort you. There was a new silence then. Not the silence of shock. The silence of calculation. Who will move? Who will witness? Who will look down and pretend a phone is a shield? The hallway beyond the door exhaled voices. The boy with the halo of curls passed, glanced in and froze. His phone came up without thinking, the way hands come up to catch a falling glass. Amina did not look at him. She looked at the officer and thought, I wrote you a script you refused to read. I'll stand in the hall, she said, if you return my chair and my binder untouched, and this meeting pauses until I return. Brant smirked. You don't make conditions here. He reached for the back of the chair, too fast, too sure, and his elbow clipped the corner of her binder. The tabbed pages spilled across the table like stunned birds. The silicone ring rolled in a slow, sad circle and vanished beneath the file cabinet. Something in Amina went still. Not brittle. Not frantic. Still, the way lakes are still before they swallow the sky. You need to step out, he repeated, his voice rougher now, and his hand touched her sleeve. It was light. It was unnecessary. It was a claim. Amina did not yank away. She took his hand in hers, gently, like removing a burr from a child's cuff, and set it back at his side. "No," she said. "You do." Perhaps it was the way she said it. Perhaps it was the way the room watched. Perhaps it was that stubborn drop of coffee drying on her collarbone like a medal for a battle she didn't choose. He moved forward anyway, a nudge that wanted to be a shove but tried not to look like one. Her shoulder met the doorframe. The impact sounded small but radiated, the way a pebble thrown into water writes its name in rings all the way to shore. The boy in the hall had the camera up now. Not shaking. Not dramatic. Just steady, like truth when it decides it's done waiting for permission. "Officer," Mr. Gray said, voice cracking into the quiet, "please." Brant turned, annoyed by the chorus of decency. It cost him half a second. In that half second, the room saw itself. A teacher with wet eyes, a principal with a tie full of trees he could not name, a counselor taking down what she was suddenly afraid to keep, and a mother whose coffee-stained blouse had out-argued a policy no one believed in. Amina bent in one unhurried movement, gathered the nearest stack of pages, and set them square in front of her seat. When she straightened, her gaze caught the sliver of glass through the doorway. Out there, the lobby trophy case still held that professional learning day photo. Her face, tiny and half-swallowed by glare, smiled from the bottom row. The caption was there too, crisp if you leaned close, "De-escalation for inclusive classrooms." She did not point to it. She did not announce who she was. She simply returned her hands to the table, the universal gesture of a person ready to continue the work that should never have been interrupted. "Shall we proceed?" she asked. Brant snorted, but something in the room had shifted. You could feel it in the way the blinds stopped rattling though no one touched the cord. In the way Ms. Rivera squared her shoulders. In the way Mr. Alder, at last, let his silence crack. "Officer Brant," the principal said, and his voice surprised even him. "Thank you. We'll call if we need you." A muscle jumped in Brant's cheek. He looked at Amina the way men look when they are not used to doors closing from the other side. He took a step back. Another. He was almost into the hall when he paused, turned, and pointed, small, petty, a last grasp at the lever he liked most. "Watch your tone," he said again, softer this time, as if saying it in a whisper would make it true. The door side shut. For a long breath no one spoke. The clock ticked in dry sounds. The pea ball outside thudded twice, then stopped as if it, too, were listening. Amina exhaled. "Now," she said, sliding a photo from a sleeve, Lila laughing, a scribble of spirals on paper, a sticker crooked on her cheek, "let's talk about my daughter." No one in that room knew that 50 feet away a boy's steady video was already floating across a handful of screens like a lantern tugged by the wind. No one knew that 3 adults in the front office, huddled behind a computer, had paused a clip of a coffee-darkened blouse and whispered, "Is that her?" No one knew that inside the school with posters about safety and calm, a story had just found its first, fragile edge of daylight. All they knew was that a mother, soaked and steady, refused to be moved. And the echo of that refusal began to travel, down the hallway, through the lobby, past the trophy case that held her name without recognizing it, and out into a town that would not be able to unsee what it had seen. The door had shut behind Officer Brant, but the air in the conference room did not return to normal. It stayed charged, humming with something raw and dangerous, the way a room feels after lightning passes close enough to raise the hair on your arms. Everyone sat too still, as though any sudden motion might invite the storm back inside. Amina pressed the stack of rescued papers flat against the table. The corners were bent now, some smudged with coffee. But her hand was steady, her voice even. "Let's begin where we left off," she said. The words should have sounded ordinary. They did not. They sounded like defiance, like a woman demanding gravity itself resume its work. Mr. Connors shifted in his chair. His file, thick as a brick, was angled toward him like a shield. "We need to address safety," he said, pointedly ignoring what had just happened. "The classroom has become unpredictable." Amina's eyes flicked to Ms. Rivera. The teacher's lips trembled, her knuckles pale around the pen. She wanted to speak but feared what honesty would cost. Unpredictable? Amina repeated. Or unsupported? The word struck clean. She slid a sheet across the table, behavior data charts, every incident logged with time and trigger. Colored dots clustered around the same hour, the same transitions. Her biting isn't random, Amina said. It happens when adults skip the supports we agreed to. Look here, every spike aligns with a substitute aid or a missed visual schedule. She tapped the paper once, firm. That's not unpredictability. That's negligence. The room stiffened. Negligence was not a word parents were supposed to use. It was the word administrators used to describe others, never themselves. Mr. Alder, the principal, coughed into his fist. Let's not throw accusations around. Accusations? Amina's voice was low, calm. I'm pointing to your own data. You initialed these plans. You filed them. And then you ignored them. Silence spread again, heavy, suffocating. Finally Ms. Rivera spoke. Her voice wavered, but she did not look away from Amina. She's right, she whispered. We didn't follow through. I asked for training. It never came. Mr. Connor's head snapped toward her. That's not accurate. Yes, it is, Rivera cut in. Her hands shook now, but her eyes steadied. I begged for support. I told you we were failing her. The truth spilled, impossible to mop back up. Amina folded her hands on the table. So instead of providing training, you blame my daughter for the harm she's endured. And you call it a placement issue. The counselor's typing faltered. For the first time, Ms. Rivera straightened in her chair. She's right, she said again louder. We failed. If this is about evidence, then the evidence shows our failure. Connor's jaw tightened. He turned to the counselor. Don't record that. The counselor froze. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Slowly, deliberately she backspaced. Amina watched the deletion. She leaned forward, voice low but sharp enough to cut. You're erasing the only person brave enough to speak the truth. How many other truths have you erased? The counselor's face flushed. Her hands trembled. She whispered, too many. The admission cracked something open. Amina looked around the table, at the bent papers, at the tired faces, at the fear trying to hold its ground against the truth. She thought of her daughter, spiraling her pencil into endless loops, waiting for adults to decide if she belonged. You will not move her, Amina said, every word weighted. You will not punish her for your failure. You will implement the plan you wrote. You will train your staff. And you will stop pretending the problem is an 8-year-old child when the problem is sitting in this room. No one spoke. From the hallway, the faint echo of sneakers squeaked against tile, the ordinary sounds of school. But inside Conference 2, nothing was ordinary. Mr. Alder looked down at his tie, as though the trees stitched into it might offer guidance. They did not. Ms. Rivera nodded slowly, her shoulders finally squaring. She's right, she said a third time, each word steadier than the last. Amina gathered her pages. The coffee stain had blurred some of the ink, but the truth was still legible. She placed them back in her binder, closed the rings with a snap that sounded final. This meeting isn't over, she said. It's just begun. She stood, the chair scraping against the floor. No one tried to stop her. In the hallway, the ordinary buzz of middle school life hummed on, lockers slamming, bells ringing, laughter spilling. But as Amina walked out, the weight of the conference clung to her like the stain on her blouse. It would not wash out. What had cracked inside that room would not be sealed again. And though no one admitted it aloud, each person knew this wasn't just about Lila anymore. It was about every child shuffled, every parent silenced, every truth erased from a counselor's notes. The storm had arrived, and no one in Hawthorne Middle could pretend they hadn't felt the first drops. By the time the last bell rang that afternoon, Hawthorne Middle felt different. The ordinary clamor of lockers and chatter carried an undertone that wasn't there the day before. Whispers traveled faster than the slam of a locker door. Teachers glanced over their shoulders before stepping into the staff lounge. Students lingered in clusters, eyes darting toward the front office as though it had become a crime scene. The meeting in Conference 2 hadn't stayed inside its four walls. It never could. The people in that room had walked out changed, shaken, exposed, unwilling or unable to pretend anymore. Ms. Rivera was the first to act. She stayed late in her classroom, fluorescent lights buzzing, walls plastered with crooked charts and laminated number lines. Her hands trembled as she pulled open her bottom desk drawer. Inside were copies of incident reports she had written but never submitted. Every time she tried to document what happened when Lila's supports weren't provided, Connors had told her not to clutter the system. So she kept them. Each one was dated, signed, and stuffed with her guilt. Now she spread them across her desk. 32 sheets of paper, each a record of failure buried under bureaucratic convenience. She stared at the pile, tears streaking the sides of her face, and realized she'd been complicit in silence. Across the hall, the counselor shut her laptop in a rush. She'd erased words in Conference 2 that should have been preserved, and the act ate at her like acid. She looked down at her fingers. They still felt stained, though the backspace key bore no mark. She whispered to herself, "Too many," remembering her slip in front of Amina. Too many voices erased, too many truths scrubbed before they could root. For the first time in her career, she wondered if she was keeping a job or killing her conscience. In the principal's office, Alder sat with his tie loosened, staring at a stack of emails he couldn't bring himself to answer. Some were from parents demanding to know why a mother was shoved in a school hallway. Others from teachers begging for clarity. The worst were from the district office, thinly veiled instructions to manage the optics. He wanted to believe he was a good man. He wanted to believe this school was still his to lead. But the truth had wedged itself into his desk like a splinter. And Amina? She walked out of the building with her daughter's binder hugged against her chest. The stain on her blouse had dried stiff, but it carried its own gravity now. Every glance from teachers, every awkward shuffle of feet in the hallway told her the fabric had become more than fabric. It was evidence, and it made people uncomfortable. She did not care. That night at her kitchen table, she laid the binder open once more. Page after page of goals, data, and signatures. Each line told the same story. Her daughter's needs were clear, but the system's will was weak. She pressed her hand over the ink as though anchoring it to the page. For years she'd taught teachers how to stand steady in the storm of a child's escalation. Now she realized she was standing in a larger storm, one that had nothing to do with children at all. She whispered to herself, not for comfort but for clarity, "They will not move her." The next morning, the school building woke unsettled. The follow-up meeting was smaller. Just Alder, Rivera, and the counselor. Connors had another commitment. Amina sat with her binder open, her hands folded on top of it. Her eyes moved from face to face. "I'm not here for apologies," she said. "I'm here for action. My daughter's supports are not optional." Rivera's voice cracked. "I have the reports." She slid the manila folder across the table. Alder hesitated, then opened it. Line after line documented failures, dates, times, names. 32 times the plan was ignored. 32 times a child was left vulnerable. Alder closed the folder slowly, his face pale. "Why wasn't this filed?" "I was told not to," Rivera whispered. The counselor looked down, shame flooding her cheeks. "And I erased too much. Too many. We've all been told to keep it clean." Amina leaned forward. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Clean for whom? Because it's not clean for my child when she comes home with bite marks. It's not clean when she learns that adults' promises dissolve into excuses. This is not clean, it's rot." Her words landed like hammer blows. No one argued. Finally Alder spoke, his voice low. "We failed her. And we've failed you." Amina didn't flinch. "Then fix it. Start with training. Start with fidelity. Start with honesty." Rivera nodded vigorously. The counselor whispered agreement. Even Alder, weary and cornered, nodded once. But before relief could settle, the office door banged open. Connors stormed in, his face flushed. "What is this?" He pointed at the folder in Alder's hands. "Unauthorized records?" "Their documentation," Alder said cautiously. "Their liabilities, Connors snapped. He turned on Rivera. Do you realize what you've done? You've compromised the district. Rivera's shoulders squared. No. I protected a child. Connors sneered. You think this makes you a hero? You've just made yourself expendable. The words cut the air like a knife. The counselor flinched. Alder looked down at his tie again, cowardice tugging him back towards silence. But Amina spoke before anyone else could. Threats are not protection. Intimidation is not leadership. You can bury files, but you cannot bury children. Connors froze. By the end of that week, Hawthorne Middle no longer felt like a school. It felt like a dam about to burst. The walls looked the same, but the air inside them was taut, vibrating with truths people had spent years swallowing. Amina sensed it the moment she walked back through the front doors. The secretary wouldn't meet her eyes anymore. Teachers who used to nod politely now gave her quiet, almost guilty glances. Parents lingered in the parking lot long after drop-off, whispering, waiting. Something was shifting, and it was bigger than one mother, one child, one meeting. The folder Ms. Rivera had handed over was now sitting in Superintendent Harris's locked office. 32 reports, raw and undeniable, threatened to unravel the neat fiction the district had spent years curating. And Harris knew it. Keep it contained, he told Principal Alder that morning. His voice was clipped, his jaw tight. If those records spread, we're exposed. Alder swallowed. They're legitimate. That doesn't matter, Harris snapped. Do you understand? This is about liability, not legitimacy. The word hung heavy. Liability. Not children. Not truth. Liability. When Alder left the office, his tie sagged lower than ever. That afternoon, Rivera's classroom door stayed closed. She stood at the window, staring down at the playground where kids shouted and swung their legs over worn swings. Her hands gripped the sill so hard her knuckles ached. She knew she'd crossed a line. She knew Connors would come for her. But for the first time, she didn't feel small. Amina's words still echoed in her chest. You will not punish her for your failure. For years, Rivera had told herself that being quiet was survival. That if she just bent a little more, ignored a little more, she could still do some good. But now she realized silence hadn't protected her students. It had protected the people failing them. The counselor wasn't sleeping. Every night she replayed the sound of her own voice whispering, "Too many," in Conference 2. The words she'd erased haunted her. She opened her laptop again and again, scrolling through empty spaces where truths had once been typed. She knew the district could bury anything. But her memory was alive, and it was burning her from the inside out. She finally pulled out a yellow legal pad and began to write, longhand, every case she could remember. Names, dates, what she'd deleted, what she'd been told to omit. The paper filled fast, her pen racing to keep up with the flood of guilt. She wrote until her hand cramped, until she could no longer deny the truth she had helped hide. Meanwhile, Connors doubled down. He stormed through the halls with clipped orders, barking at staff to stick to the plan and stop fueling hysteria. He called Rivera into his office twice, threatening disciplinary action. He told the counselor she was on thin ice. He cornered Alder in the hallway, demanding to know if he'd lost control of the building. But Connors's fury only exposed his fear. The more he barked, the clearer it became. He was trying to hold back a tide with his bare hands. And then came the spark he hadn't anticipated. Friday morning, a parent named Evelyn James walked into the front office. Her son, Marcus, had been pulled out of class the year before and placed in temporary isolation. She had begged for explanations, filed complaints, written emails. Every answer had been the same, "We'll look into it." And then silence. She carried a thin folder of her own, copies of unanswered letters, records of calls that went nowhere, a doctor's note about the anxiety her son had developed since being pulled from his peers. She set the folder on Alder's desk, her voice shaking but firm. "Did you know?" she asked. "Know what?" Alder said, weary already. "That Connors buried my complaints. That Rivera's reports never made it past his desk. Did you know my son was locked in a room for 6 weeks with no plan, no review, nothing but busy work?" Alder froze. He hadn't known the details, but now he couldn't pretend. He looked at the papers, then at the mother standing in front of him, her eyes blazing. "You failed us," Evelyn said, voice rising. "You failed him." And just like that, the silence cracked wider. By lunchtime, whispers swelled into murmurs. Teachers who had once been cautious began comparing notes. A fifth-grade teacher remembered her own complaint disappearing after she reported a colleague's rough handling of a child with autism. A reading specialist recalled being told to drop it when she flagged repeated suspensions of black boys for minor infractions. The stories fit together like puzzle pieces. Alone they had felt isolated, ignorable. Together they formed a picture too damning to dismiss. Ms. Rivera took the risk first. She slipped copies of her 32 reports into 3 envelopes, one for Alder, one for the union rep, and one she carried in her purse. Insurance. If the district tried to erase them again, she wouldn't let it happen quietly. The counselor followed. She brought her handwritten list to Amina after school, voice trembling as she placed it on the table. "This is what I erased," she said. "This is what I was told to delete. I can't undo it, but I won't hide anymore." Amina's hands tightened around the pages. Each line was another child failed, another family dismissed. Her throat burned, but her voice was steady. "Then we start here," she said. "We build from this." That evening, Alder called Harris again. His voice shook. "We have a problem. Parents are talking. Staff are turning. This won't stay inside the building." Harris's response was cold. "Then shut it down." "How?" Alder asked. "Find a scapegoat. Someone expendable. Make it look like we handled it. Brandt maybe. Rivera, if you must. Just keep the district clean." Alder's stomach turned. The words were clear. Children didn't matter, staff didn't matter, parents didn't matter. Only appearances mattered. He hung up the phone and stared at his reflection in the dark office window. He saw the outline of a man who had let cowardice wear him thin. Saturday morning, Connors drafted a statement. It named Officer Brandt as the problem, painted the incident as an isolated misjudgment, and praised the district for swift action. It included no mention of Amina, no mention of 32 ignored reports, no mention of systemic rot. He slid it across Alder's desk with a satisfied smile. "This ends it." But Alder didn't pick it up. His hand hovered, then fell back to his side. "This doesn't end anything," he whispered. Connors scowled. "You've gone soft." "No," Alder said, his voice firmer now than it had been in months. "I've gone tired. Tired of lying." For the first time, Connors looked rattled. Meanwhile, Amina spent the weekend at her dining table, binder open, the counselor's notes and Rivera's reports spread around her like battle plans. She read each page, her chest heavy with sorrow and fire. Every erased line, every buried file, every child's name was proof of a pattern too wide to ignore. She thought of Lila, of the bite marks on her arm, of her laughter when supported, her silence when dismissed. She thought of every parent who had sat across from Connors and been told to calm down, to accept less, to stop making waves. Amina pressed her palm against the pile of papers. "No more," she said aloud, to the empty room, to the ghosts of all the voices erased. She was not just a mother anymore. She was a witness. And now, she was ready to be a weapon. Monday loomed, and with it, the district's attempt to contain the fire. But the fire was already in the walls. And once it's in the walls, there is no containing it. What had begun with a shove and a coffee stain had become something larger, something that would not be silenced by statements or scapegoats. The cover was tearing, and what spilled through would demand more than apologies. It would demand a reckoning. Monday came heavy. Clouds hung low, bruised and swollen, as though the sky itself knew what was about to unfold. By 8 o'clock, Hawthorne Middle's parking lot was full, not just with minivans and teachers' cars, but with parents who normally would have driven off the second their children disappeared inside. Some clutched folders. Some clutched coffee cups. All carried the weight of years spent being told their voices didn't matter. Inside, the district office scrambled. Superintendent Harris had planned to control the story with a press release blaming Officer Brandt. The document painted him as a rogue actor, a rare misstep in an otherwise pristine system. It was neat, it was sterile, and it was a lie. But the lie never had a chance to take root. Before the press release could be issued, envelopes appeared on the desks of school board members. Rivera had slipped them into mail slots before dawn. Each one contained copies of her 32 ignored reports. Each one bore her signature and the dates that proved Connors had buried them. At 9 o'clock sharp, the board convened in the auditorium. Parents filled the seats. Teachers lined the walls. Even students slipped in, drawn by the hum of something bigger than school rules. The air was electric, thick with expectation. Harris stood at the podium, smoothing his tie, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We are here to address a regrettable incident," he began. "We take matters of professionalism very seriously. Officer Brandt's conduct." "Stop hiding behind him," a voice called out from the audience. Evelyn James rose from her seat, folder in hand. "This isn't about one officer. This is about years of our children being ignored, hidden, and pushed aside." She walked down the aisle and placed her folder on the stage. "Here are my unanswered complaints. Read them." Gasps rippled. Murmurs swelled. Rivera stood next. She walked to the front, her steps slow but sure, and placed her envelope beside Evelyn's. 32 reports, she said, her voice steady. All dismissed. All children failed. The counselor followed, trembling but resolute, holding her yellow pad of handwritten notes. "These are the truths I erased because I was told to. I will not erase another." The pile on the stage grew, paper after paper, evidence after evidence. Each sheet was a wound finally uncovered. Harris's face paled. His script dissolved in his hands. Connors, red with fury, stood to speak, but the room turned on him. Teachers who had once stayed quiet stepped forward, their voices sharp. "You told us to drop cases. You silenced us. You made us complicit." The board members shifted, their whispers urgent. The weight of proof was undeniable. What had been whispered in hallways was now undeniable under fluorescent lights. Then Amina rose. She carried her binder, the coffee-stained pages still tucked inside. She did not walk quickly, nor did she raise her voice when she reached the podium. She didn't need to. The room quieted the moment she opened the binder and placed it flat in front of her. "My daughter's name is Lila," she began. "She is 8 years old. She loves patterns. She hums when she writes. She shines when you see her. But too often, you did not see her. You buried her plan. You dismissed her needs. You let her get hurt because it was easier to hide your failures than to admit them." She looked at the faces in the crowd. Parents, teachers, children. "This isn't just about her. It isn't just about me. Every page in this pile represents another child who was erased by the people meant to protect them. And every parent here knows it." Her hand pressed against the binder. "I have spent my career teaching you how to calm storms in classrooms. But the storm has never been the children. It has always been the adults who refuse to follow their own rules." The silence was complete now, the kind that listens. "We will not let you bury our children anymore," she said. "Not my daughter. Not Evelyn's son. Not the dozens of names on these pages. You will be accountable. You will change. Because we are done being quiet." The applause that followed was not polite. It was thunderous, cathartic, years of swallowed anger released at once. Parents shouted their children's names, teachers clapped until their palms stung, and even students stood, their voices rising like a chorus. "Do better! Do better!" The board president, shaken, finally spoke. "Effective immediately, Officer Brandt is removed from this building. Mr. Connors is placed on administrative leave pending investigation. And we are initiating a full independent audit of every complaint, every report, every file." It was not everything, but it was a start. Amina stepped down from the podium. Rivera met her halfway and embraced her, tears streaking both their faces. The counselor pressed her notes into Amina's hands. "Keep them safe," she whispered. "They belong in the light." When the meeting adjourned, parents lingered in the parking lot, no longer whispering. They talked openly, traded numbers, plan their next steps. They were no longer individuals begging for scraps. They were a community. That night, Amina sat on her porch with her daughter curled in her lap, humming softly as the sun bled orange across the sky. The binder rested beside her, pages still damp in places where coffee had stained the ink. She thought of the moment Brant's hand gripped her sleeve. She thought of Connor's barking to erase the truth. She thought of Rivera's trembling hands delivering the reports, of the counselor's whispered confession, of the parents who had stood up with her. She realized then, justice wasn't just in punishments handed down or audits announced. Justice was in voices that refused to be silenced, in communities that finally saw themselves in each other, in the courage to stand even when standing cost you something. She looked down at Lila, who had fallen asleep against her chest, her curls warm and soft against her blouse. "You belong here," Amina whispered, brushing a hand over her daughter's hair. "And now they'll remember it." Her eyes lifted to the darkening street. This wasn't the end. The system was bigger than one school, one district, one shove in a hallway. But it was a beginning. And beginnings matter. She thought of every parent who would walk into a school tomorrow carrying the same fear, the same binder, the same quiet desperation to be heard. She hoped they knew they weren't alone. "This is larger than me," she murmured. "Larger than Ridgeway. But maybe, just maybe, it starts here." And to you watching this story unfold, let it remind you that silence only protects the powerful. Change comes when ordinary people refuse to look away, when communities demand better for their children, when one mother's refusal becomes a reckoning for all. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on justice, on community, and on the power of a single voice standing firm, then show your support. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories that shine light where silence once ruled, and leave a comment below. Tell us what justice means to you, and who you are standing for. Because together, our voices build the justice our children deserve.